course. Interest charges on new external loans have hit a new high. Universities and TVETs face a 59 billion shilling funding hole. Where? That story was about basic education,
yes,
right?
It was.
Primary and secondary schools?
Yep, it was.
Now in higher education, there's a 58.8 billion shillings financial funding hole in the financial year that's ending in June, in the current financial year.
59 billion.
59 billion.
It's a ridiculous amount. And
Yeah.
Eric, you've spun this thread before of how we get ourselves into this problem, which is the government doesn't release the required capitation funds. Universities and other institutions of learning are then forced to go into debt with their suppliers, and it's such a dangerous cycle. Next financial quarter, or whenever funds are being dispersed, same thing. So again, you're in deeper debt. It's a constant cycle of we promise we've got you. A 59 billion shilling funding hole, and then they start cutting back on essentials, things that should be standard procedure for all education institutions. But now, you find that whether it's a school lunch that disappears, whether it's a teacher having to buy chalk from their own pocket, whether it's basic infrastructure that's not being maintained well because of lack of funding. But I don't know, our education is really, really at a critical point. I'm really worried because we are at a point where whatever we saw last year was as a result of the work that Mwai Kibaki put in, free primary education, etc. The well-educated, informed populace is as a result of that. And this, to me, feels like it's taking us back.
It is.
Yeah.
Compromising on something as essential as education and it not being seen as some of the little things that you've even mentioned, somebody having to go into their pocket, which isn't sustainable. Meals having to be cut down now, something that's happening widespread. Right. All of that adds up. And so 10 years from now, if things like this persist, what does it say about the children who are trying to access critical education? What does it say about their chances? Because these shortcuts all add up. Right? It also means I can't perform necessarily as well in school if I do not have the cushioning that can make me a student who's alert. It all adds up, and it's starting now. And to your point about the overborrowing and the money disappearing, even what you've just asked, is now what happens to the SACCOs, what happens to the schools, right? What happens for a country that's in like a debt crisis where money again also just kind of disappears.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like it's I know. Like every day I've woken up stressed by
The
the
overthinker.
Yeah. Every day.
Here she goes. Go.
How could you
9
not?
9 p.m. 9 a.m.
The problem is once you see the thread, you can't unsee it.
You can't unsee the thread.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
That this is not happening now. All right? It's becoming more visible now, but this has been the trend. Even the days when we had, the free primary education program launched by Mwai Kibaki and all, we did not have sufficient funding for education sector. That's the thing. Education takes the biggest chunk of our budget every year.
Yes.
And it keeps rising. The amount of money that we've put in keeps rising. So what has been happening before in our higher education program is that the government is expected to offer a certain amount of money for scholarship. Okay? It's called the differentiated unit costs, which is supposed to be a certain percentage per course, I think about 80% or thereabouts. And the government has just been doing...
Per learner or per
learner.
Okay.
And then the government has just been doing about 30%. So there's an entire funding gap that's been there for universities for so long. That's why universities are collapsing because of debt. Because then the other bit is where you get your help, so you just go and pay the help amount. But you assume that help amount that you've paid, 30K per year, is what is needed to actually take you through the university for the year. Yet it's not. The government is supposed to have been sending money. It wasn't. Now here we are. The amount that should have gone into TVETs and universities for this year is 145.54 billion shillings. The amount of money that's available, according to the Education Ministry data, is 86.83 billion shillings, hence the gap of 59 billion shillings. Now, this is being raised by the Parliamentary Budget Office, which is a critical office in Parliament, which has economists and public finance management experts who basically pour through these and they advise parliamentary committees on this is what's happening. This is what they said. This resource gap is a clear indication that learners at various levels are not funded as expected based on existing policies on funding. This may, in the long run, affect the quality of education being delivered in our learning institutions, hence negatively affecting the education outcomes. This is the Parliamentary Budget Office. It has given the report to members of Parliament. The question is, those people who sit in Parliament, do they understand this?
They do.
They do.
Because it's not the first time.
They don't.
The Parliamentary Budget Office has
They
been
hear
ignored.
it, they just don't get it. If they did, the next thing you'd be saying is, let's look at the budget for next year and let's make sure that we have this. If the need is 145.54 billion shillings, but we are not able to raise it, come to us as Treasury and tell us how you're going to bridge that gap. But you cannot be passing budgets that have this kind of gaps. You cannot be oversighting an education ministry that has this kind of funding gaps and then just sit back and the next thing you're going to tell us is, we are the majority, you are the minority, we need the speaker's position.
It's not a lack of capacity, Eric. It's a lack of goodwill.
I was going to say they understand it. It's just